Hello there, my name's Hido and welcome to another episode of the Pantheon, where we're going to be having a look at one of the new sorcery side commanders. Really quite cool, to be honest. Without further ado, let's have a look at Blex, Vexing Pest, a 3-mana pest. Now, Blex is an incredible name. It really is. It just sounds so weird, and you know the artwork really speaks to that. 3 mana, nice and recastable. But let's have a look at his abilities. So he's a pest creature type, and other pests, bats, insects, snakes, and spiders you control get +1/+1. When he dies, you gain 4 life. Pretty cool. And he's a 3/2. Overall, nice little lord for all these horrible little creatures. Now, the other side of him is where I am slightly more excited. Search for Blex is a 4-mana sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put any number of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 3 life for each card you put into your hand this way. So, straight away from the command zone, we've got a nice card advantage engine. And, you know, unfortunately, after you cast it, well, you could put it into your command zone, but for this deck, I want it to be going to the graveyard. And a lot of the cards that we're going to be filtering through as well. Because green-black, very much, you know, graveyard-centered. And with that, at number 5, we've got Yavimaya Granger. 3 mana for an elf. With Echo, which means during your next upkeep, after this permanent comes into play, pay its casting cost or sacrifice it. Then, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card, put that land into play tapped, shuffle your library afterwards. And it's a 2/2. So, a lot of this deck, we want to be filling our graveyard as much as possible. And this is an excellent way to ramp, but also fill your graveyard. To go along with that, we've got a couple of other things. Corrosion Tusker is a 7-mana 6/5 with cycling, you know, best ability ever, for 3 mana, which means you discard it and draw a card. When you cycle it, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So it doesn't ramp to the field, but it's a green divination, which is pretty damn good. Shefet Monitor is along the same sort of lines. 6 mana for a 6/5, cycling of 4. When you cycle it, you may search your library for a basic land or desert card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Absolutely fantastic. Fills the graveyard, gets creatures in there. Finally, Sakura Tribe Elder, who is a snake. Sacrifice him, search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, tapped, shuffle your library. It's a 1/1. So, nice bit of buffs, and then we can move onwards to number 4. In at number 4, we've got a classic Golgari Grave Troll. 5 mana for a 0/0. It enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. Pay 1, remove a 1/1 counter from it, regenerate Golgari Grave Troll. And the main reason that we're going to be playing it, Dredge 6. So, using our sorcery side of our commander, we can dump a bunch of cards into our graveyard, and that'll allow us to start the Dredge cycle. We can keep filling up our graveyard, and it's just so cool that we can do it like that. To go along with this, we've got a couple of other ways to fill the graveyard. Nyx Weaver is a spider, so it Blex buffs it. 3 mana for a 2/3 with Reach. At the beginning of your upkeep, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard, so again, fills up your graveyard. And you can pay 3 mana, exile it, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Not creature, sorry, any card. So, nice little regrowth effect while you're also filling the graveyard. Works very well. If you really wanted to, if Blex is in your graveyard, you can bring him back. Stinkweed Dip, 3 mana 1/2 with flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, destroy a creature. Basically Death Touch. And Dredge 5, so again, this is one of the ones one of the cards we want to see with our sorcery and dump into our graveyard. Life from the Loam, 2 mana for a sorcery. Return up to 3 target land cards from your graveyard to your hand. Dredge 3. There we go, nice bit of value. And if we have a look here, here are the sort of lands that we want to be dumping into our graveyard with the sorcery, and then we can get back at a later date. Darkmoor Salvage is a land that enters the battlefield tapped and taps for a black. But it also has Dredge 2, so you put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard and bring it back to your hand. Pretty sweet. Drownyard Temple. I really heavily invested in Drownyard Temple when it was printed. I got about 8 foils of it because I was convinced it was going to skyrocket in price. Sadly, it really hasn't. Drownyard Temple is a land that taps for colours. Pay 3, return Drownyard Temple from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It's colourless ramp. You know, if it's in your graveyard, it puts you ahead 1 mana for that turn just by paying 3. Very, very cool. Finally, Barren Moor is a land that enters tapped. Taps for a black. Now cycling for 1 black, which works incredibly well with Life Alone. We can just constantly cycle through our deck, dredging over and over again. That brings us on to number 3. Phyrexian Reclamation. 1 black for an enchantment. Pay colourless and a black. Pay 2 life. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, the main reason we want effects like this, instead of just classic reanimation spells, is when we play the sorcery side of Blex, Blex will go into a graveyard and be a creature in the graveyard. So, with effects like this, we can bring back Blex and either cast it as Blex, or we can search for Blex. There's too many Blexes going on. And if you wanted to build a nice sort of like pay life or lose life synergy into the deck, this is a great card for it. To go along with it, we've got Tortured Existence, a Pauper staple. 1 black for an enchantment. Pay a black, choose and discard a creature card. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So, brings back Blex, puts a big fatty into the graveyard. Maybe you want to reanimate or something like that. Oversold Cemetery is a 2 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 4 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So, this is a free effect. You know, we're going to be wanting to fill our graveyard with as many creatures as possible. And this will constantly bring back either our commander or another key piece of interaction. Finally, we've got Find Finality. Find 2 mana, return up to 2 target creatures cards from your graveyard to your hand. So, can get back Blex. And then, Finality, you may put 2 or more counters onto a creature you control. Then all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. So, nice little board wipe, can potentially protect one of our big dudes. And, you know, it works really well. Genesis is an absolutely fantastic card in this deck. 5 mana gets you a 4/4, I think it is. Go on a second. Oh, yeah, 4/4. And Genesis, we mainly want him in the graveyard. We do not want him in our hand. It's an incarnation with, at the beginning of your upkeep, if Genesis is in your graveyard, you may pay 3. If you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So we can Blex over and over again, gain some life if we play the creature card and sacrifice him, or just keep casting the sorcery. Finally, Magus of the Will and Yawgmoth's Will. Yawgmoth's Will, very, very expensive, and I don't see it going down. I think it's on the reserve list. Magus of the Will, 3 mana for a human wizard. Pay 3 and tap it, exile Magus of the Will. Until end of turn, you may play lands and cast spells from your graveyard. If a card will be put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, exile that card instead. So 3/3. Yawgmoth's Will is that exact ability just on a sorcery. This is incredible and can really get you back into the game if you're behind or, you know, there's been a board wipe or you've just dumped a ton of stuff in. You can just cast everything and bring everything back. Very, very powerful. Which brings on to number 2. We've dumped a lot of things into our graveyard. And Splinter Fright is a classic creature that really benefits from that. 3 mana gets you an elemental with trample. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So we've been milling over, you know, doing lots of stuff. And then this is going to be an absolutely massive little dude. This massive little dude. Bit of a wrongness there. Wrongness, God, my mind is melting. Words are just not coming to me. Anyway, it'll be massive. And he also has the ability, at the beginning of your upkeep, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. So he just powers himself. Really, really cool creature. To go along with him, we've got Lord of Extinction, which is a 5 mana star. When Lord of Extinction's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in all graveyards. So it doesn't just care about creatures, it cares about absolutely everything. And your opponents as well. This dude will be absolutely ridiculously large, especially if our deck has come together and we're milling as much as we want to. Jared Golgari Lich Lord is very similar to Splinter Fright. 4 mana for a 2/2. It gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. But it has the ability 3, sacrifice another creature. Each opponent loses life equals to the sacrificed creature's power. Combine this with Lord of Extinction, and your opponents are going to die. They're just going to cease to exist. Then he also has the ability to sacrifice a swamp or forest to return Jared from your graveyard to your hand. So if you mill him over, late game you can bring him back just by sacrificing some lands. Then a brand new card here, Tend the Pests, is a 2-mana instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Well, okay, we want to sacrifice a creature. Maybe we have to sacrifice one of our big dudes. If we do, we create X 1/1 black and green pest tokens with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life, where X is a sacrificed creature's power. So say Lord of Extinction is a 50-50. You sack it to this, you've got 50 1/1s that when they die, they gain your life. And the pests, so our Blex will buff them all into 2/2s. Lovely bit of synergy there. Which brings us on to number 1. And while Blex is a tribal commander, the tribes he's covering are just not very good. So I've picked and, chose different ones from throughout the entirety of his set. His only Thousand-Eyed isn't actually one of them, but she's a 6-mana legendary elf shaman. There's a 2/3 with Undergrowth. When it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token for each creature card in your graveyard. So this is a theme we've been talking about just before. We want to get as many creatures in our graveyard as possible, and she can make a ton of little insect tokens. Then she also sacrifices another creature, you gain 1 life, and draw a card. So that life gain can offset a bit of the damage that our 4-mana sorcery has done to us. Really, really cool, and so many insect tokens, and Blex will just pump them all a little bit. It's wonderful. Spider Spawning is a 5-mana sorcery. Create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach for each creature card in your graveyard. Flashback for 7 mana. Again, Blex will pump them all, and you'll just have a ton of little dudes. Ishkana Graph Widow is a 5-mana 3/5 with reach and delirium, which means if you need 4 types in your graveyard, which should be pretty easy to do. When Ishkana Graph Widow enters the battlefield, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, put 3 1/2 green spider creature tokens with reach onto the battlefield. And the ability 7 mana, target opponent loses 1 life for each spider you control. So if we've been spider spawning, Ishkana's, maybe we've sacked her, brought her back to our hand, cast her again. This can be a game-ending play, killed people with spiders. Keswick Cage Breakers isn't one of the tribal things, but he just works so well in this sort of token-based strategy. 5 mana for a 3/4. Whenever it attacks, create a 2/2 green wolf creature token that's tapped and attacking for each creature card in your graveyard. Works wonderfully with this deck. Then we've got Scoot Swarm. Doesn't work with any of our graveyard sort of strategies, but he is an insect. 3 mana for a 1/1 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. So you'll have 2 Scoot Swarms, then 4, then 8, and so on and so forth. It's just exponentially. No, it'd be more than that, I think. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But you get a lot of them, basically. A lot of dudes. And you can go really wide, play a creator who kill your opponents. Distended Mindbender is a Eldrazi insect for 8 mana. With the Emerge ability, that means you may cast this spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost, reduced by that creature's converted mana cost. When you cast Distended Mindbender, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose from it a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less, and a card with converted mana cost 4 or greater. That player discards those cards. This can actually absolutely be backbreaking, and say if you sacrifice your Blex, that's reducing it by 3, so we're getting this 5/5 that rips our opponent's hands for 4 mana. Pretty good deal. Finally, there's Gravebaker Lamia. 5 mana for a 4/4 with lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, and then shuffle. You make spells that you cast from your graveyard cost 1 less. And it's a snake, so it can slither around and kill your opponents. And those are my top 5 cards for Blex. A really interesting command. I wanted to build it in a very graveyard-centered way, but I'm sure there's a lot of other ways that you can build it. Combo, potentially, as you can just dig through your deck. Who knows? Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.